Marcus Thompson had always been a dreamer. Growing up in a small apartment on the outskirts of town, he spent much of his childhood sketching designs for clothes on scraps of paper. His mother used to joke that he'd turn their dining table into a fashion studio one day. But Marcus wasn't joking. He was serious about creating something meaningful. He wanted to build a brand that would reflect his community's culture and spirit, while offering high-quality clothing people could feel proud wearing. After graduating from college with a degree in business management, Marcus worked multiple jobs to save money for his dream. He delivered packages during the day and bartended at night, all while brainstorming ideas for what would eventually become Urban Threads. It wasn't easy. There were days when he doubted himself, wondering if he'd ever have enough resources to make it happen. But Marcus had grit. Every rejection letter from potential investors only fueled his determination to prove them wrong. Finally, after years of hard work, Marcus secured enough funding to open his store. Located in a vibrant neighborhood known for its art galleries and cafes, Urban Threads quickly became a hub for locals looking for trendy yet affordable outfits. The shop featured bold colors, intricate patterns, and unique pieces designed by Marcus himself. Customers loved not just the clothes, but also the welcoming atmosphere Marcus created inside the store. He made sure everyone who walked through the door felt valued, whether they were browsing casually or ready to buy. As the months passed, Urban Threads gained popularity. People came from neighboring towns to shop there, and online orders started pouring in. Social media played a huge role in spreading the word. Photos of happy customers wearing Urban Threads creations went viral, attracting even more attention. Local newspapers wrote glowing reviews calling Marcus a rising star in the fashion industry. For once, life seemed perfect, or as close to perfect as it could get. But running a successful business came with challenges Marcus hadn't anticipated. Between managing inventory, training employees, and keeping up with customer demands, he found himself stretched thin. That's when he decided to hire an interim manager to help oversee daily operations while he focused on expanding the brand. Enter Lisa Carter, a seasoned professional with years of experience in retail management. On paper, she looked like the ideal candidate, organized, efficient, and knowledgeable about the industry. Marcus interviewed her twice before making the decision, trusting that she'd uphold the values he'd built Urban Threads on. At first, things ran smoothly. Lisa took charge of scheduling shifts, handling customer complaints, and ensuring the store stayed tidy. Marcus appreciated having someone reliable to lean on, especially since he planned to take a short trip soon. He needed to visit suppliers in another city to restock fabrics and accessories, a crucial step in maintaining the quality of his products. With Lisa in place, he felt confident leaving the store in capable hands. However, beneath Lisa's polished exterior lay prejudices she rarely acknowledged. Though she appeared professional, she often judged people based on appearances rather than actions. This bias didn't surface immediately, but over time, subtle signs began to emerge. Employees noticed how she treated certain customers differently, particularly those who looked out of place or didn't fit her idea of affluence. She'd follow them around the store, questioning their intentions, or ignore their requests altogether. Some staff members mentioned these behaviors to Marcus during his occasional visits, but he dismissed their concerns, assuming it was just a misunderstanding. Little did Marcus know, this oversight would lead to a situation far more personal and painful than anything he'd imagined. Unaware of the storm brewing back home, he boarded a flight to finalize deals with suppliers, excited to bring new designs to Urban Threads. What he didn't realize was that upon his return, he'd face an experience that would test everything he believed in and force him to confront the harsh realities of prejudice head-on. The stage was set for a clash between ambition and ignorance, between justice and judgment. Marcus had no idea that stepping foot into his own store again would change his life forever. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Urban Threads as Marcus stepped out of his car, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. After a long week of traveling and negotiating with suppliers, he was finally back home. He couldn't wait to see how the store had been doing under Lisa's management and share the exciting new designs he'd brought back. The boutique looked just as inviting as ever. Its glass doors gleamed and the mannequins in the window displayed outfits that still felt fresh and stylish. For a moment, Marcus paused outside, taking it all in. This place wasn't just a business. It was his heart and soul. Casually dressed in a hoodie and jeans, Marcus pushed open the door, the familiar chime of the bell above announcing his arrival. The scent of freshly brewed coffee from the corner cafe next door mingled with the faint aroma of fabric softener, a comforting combination that always reminded him of why he started this journey. But instead of being greeted warmly by Lisa or one of his employees, Marcus noticed an immediate shift in the atmosphere. Heads turned toward him briefly, but no one smiled or waved. Instead, there was an awkward silence, followed by whispers, among the staff behind the counter. Before Marcus could say anything, Lisa appeared from the stockroom, her eyes narrowing as she took him in. Her expression hardened almost instantly, and she approached him with an air of suspicion. "Can I help you?" she asked curtly, her tone clipped and unwelcoming. Marcus blinked, momentarily caught off guard. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, Lisa cut him off. "Are you here for something specific, or are you just browsing?" For a second, Marcus thought maybe she hadn't recognized him. It wouldn't be surprising. He'd been gone for over a week, and he wasn't exactly dressed like a CEO today. Smiling slightly, he replied, "Actually, I'm the owner. I've been away on a buying trip, but I'm back now." Lisa's lips tightened into a thin line, and her gaze flickered over him dismissively. "You don't look like the owner," she said bluntly, her voice carrying just enough volume for nearby customers to hear. Marcus felt a pang of unease. He glanced around, noticing some shoppers turning their heads curiously while others pretended not to notice. His smile faltered, but he tried again. "I assure you I am. My name is Marcus Thompson. Maybe we can talk privately so I can explain." Instead of softening, Lisa's demeanor grew colder. She crossed her arms over her chest and tilted her head slightly as if sizing him up. "Look, sir, I don't know who you are, but I manage this store. If you're not here to shop, then I need you to leave. You're making people uncomfortable." Marcus froze. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Making people uncomfortable. How could simply walking into his own store make anyone uncomfortable? He glanced at the other employees, hoping someone would step in and confirm his identity. But they avoided eye contact, shuffling nervously or pretending to tidy shelves. Even Jamal, one of his most trusted workers, busied himself folding t-shirts, refusing to meet Marcus's gaze. Feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief, Marcus tried once more. "Lisa, I understand you might not recognize me since I've been gone, but I own this place. I can show you proof if you'd like." His voice remained calm, though his hands balled into fists at his sides. But Lisa wasn't listening. Her patience, or whatever semblance of professionalism she'd maintained, was clearly wearing thin. "Sir, I've already asked you nicely to leave. Please don't make me call security." Her tone was sharp, leaving no room for negotiation. A few customers nearby exchanged uneasy glances, whispering quietly among themselves. One elderly woman even shook her head disapprovingly, though whether it was directed at Marcus or Lisa, he couldn't tell. By now, Marcus realized that reasoning with Lisa wasn't going to work. She had already made up her mind about him based solely on how he looked. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, standing in a store filled with clothes designed to empower people of color, yet he was being treated like an outsider because of the color of his skin. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, but Marcus forced himself to stay composed. Losing his temper wouldn't solve anything. It would only escalate the situation further. Reluctantly, Marcus raised his hands in surrender, signaling that he wasn't going to argue anymore. "Fine," he said evenly, though his jaw clenched tightly. "I'll go, but trust me, this isn't over." With that, he turned on his heel and walked out of the store, the weight of humiliation pressing down on him. As the door closed behind him, he heard Lisa mutter something under her breath to another employee, though he couldn't quite catch the words. Whatever they were, they stung deeply. Standing on the sidewalk outside Urban Threads, Marcus exhaled slowly, trying to steady his breathing, His mind raced with questions. How could this happen? Why didn't anyone stand up for him? And what was he supposed to do now? Part of him wanted to march right back inside and demand answers, but he knew that wouldn't accomplish much. No, he needed a plan, a way to address this injustice without letting his emotions get the better of him. As he stood there, staring at the storefront he'd poured his heart into building, Marcus felt a surge of determination wash over him. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every black person who had ever been judged unfairly because of their appearance. It was about holding people accountable for their biases and ensuring that places like Urban Threads remained safe spaces for everyone. With newfound resolve, Marcus pulled out his phone and began typing a message to Jamal. Despite the awkwardness, earlier, he trusted Jamal enough to ask for clarification about what had happened inside the store during his absence. Then he scrolled through his contacts until he found the number of a local journalist he'd met at a community event months ago. If Lisa thought this incident would end quietly, she was sorely mistaken. Marcus wasn't just going to let this slide, he was going to fight back. Not out of revenge, but out of justice. And so, as the bustling neighborhood continued its daily rhythm around him, Marcus Thompson set his sights on reclaiming not just his dignity, but also the principles his store represented. Little did Lisa know her actions had ignited a fire within him, one that would soon spread far beyond the walls of Urban Threads. Marcus sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel tightly as he replayed the humiliating scene in his mind. The sting of being thrown out of his own store lingered, but it wasn't just about him. It was bigger than that. He knew this kind of prejudice didn't happen in isolation. It was part of a pattern, one he'd heard whispers about before but never fully confronted. Now those whispers had turned into shouts, and Marcus realized he couldn't ignore them anymore. Determined to get to the bottom of things, Marcus decided to start with his employees. They were the backbone of Urban Threads, the people who kept the store running smoothly every day. If Lisa's behavior toward him was any indication, there was a good chance others had experienced similar treatment, or at least witnessed it firsthand. But Marcus also understood that asking his staff to speak up wouldn't be easy. People often feared retaliation or discomfort when speaking out against authority figures, especially someone like Lisa, who carried herself with an air of superiority. The next morning, Marcus called Jamal, one of his longest-standing employees. Jamal had been with Urban Threads since its early days, and Marcus trusted him implicitly. "Hey, man," Marcus began hesitantly after exchanging pleasantries. "I need to talk to you about something important. Can we meet later today?" Jamal agreed without hesitation, sensing the seriousness in Marcus's voice. They met at a quiet coffee shop around the corner from the store. Over steaming cups of coffee, Marcus recounted what had happened the previous day. At first, Jamal listened silently, his brow furrowing as Marcus described Lisa's dismissive attitude and refusal to believe he was the owner. When Marcus finished, Jamal sighed deeply, rubbing the back of his neck. "Man, I wish I could say I'm surprised, but..." His voice trailed off, and Marcus leaned forward, urging him to continue. Jamal explained that Lisa's behavior wasn't new. In fact, several employees had noticed how she treated certain customers differently, especially black shoppers. She would follow them closely through the aisles, questioning their intentions or implying they couldn't afford the merchandise. Some employees had even overheard her making snide comments under her breath about certain types of customers. Jamal admitted he hadn't said anything earlier because he didn't want to cause trouble, but now that Marcus had brought it up, he felt compelled to share the truth. Encouraged by Jamal's honesty, Marcus reached out to other employees throughout the day. Each conversation revealed more unsettling details. One worker mentioned how Lisa once refused to ring up a purchase for a young black mother, claiming her credit card looked suspicious, even though the transaction went through without issue. Another recalled how Lisa rolled her eyes whenever Marcus's name came up during team meetings, muttering things like, "He probably doesn't even know what he's doing anyway." As Marcus pieced together these accounts, a disturbing picture emerged. Lisa wasn't just rude or unprofessional, she was actively fostering an environment where discrimination thrived. What made matters worse was that no one had felt comfortable, Enough to report her actions, not to Marcus, not to anyone. Fear of backlash kept everyone silent, allowing Lisa's biases to go unchecked. But Marcus wasn't content to let the story end there. He wanted concrete evidence, something undeniable that could expose Lisa's behavior and hold her accountable. That's when he remembered the security cameras installed throughout the store. Urban Threads had always prioritized safety, so cameras monitored nearly every corner of the space. If Lisa's actions were as blatant as his employees claimed, there was a good chance the footage would reveal the truth. Later that evening, Marcus returned to the store, not to confront Lisa, but to access the surveillance system. Using his admin credentials, he reviewed hours of recordings from different angles. What he saw left him both angry and heartbroken. In clip after clip, Lisa's discriminatory tendencies played out in full view. There was footage of her trailing behind black customers while ignoring white ones, openly rolling her eyes when a group of teenagers browsed the racks, and even snapping at an elderly black man who asked for help finding a specific item. The most damning moment came when Marcus watched himself walk into the store earlier that week. The disdain on Lisa's face was unmistakable, and her body language screamed hostility long before she uttered a single word. Armed with this evidence, Marcus knew he needed to take his case beyond the confines of Urban Threads. This wasn't just about firing a problematic manager. It was about shining a light on systemic issues within retail spaces. He thought about all the times he'd read stories of black shoppers being profiled or mistreated in stores across the country. Those incidents weren't isolated, they were symptoms of a larger problem, one that required public attention and action. That's when Marcus reached out to Sarah Collins, a local journalist known for her work covering social justice issues. He'd met her briefly at a community event months ago and admired her dedication to amplifying marginalized voices. After explaining the situation and sharing some of the footage, Marcus asked if she'd be willing to write about what had happened. To his relief, Sarah agreed immediately. "This is exactly the kind of story people need to hear," she told him. "It's real, it's relatable, and it highlights a critical issue." Over the next few days, Marcus worked closely with Sarah to gather additional details. Together, they interviewed employees who felt safe coming forward, compiled testimonials from affected customers, and reviewed the security footage frame by frame. Every piece of information added weight to the narrative, painting a vivid picture of how bias can seep into everyday interactions and how dangerous it becomes when left unaddressed. As the article took shape, Marcus reflected on his own emotions. Anger and frustration still simmered beneath the surface, but they were tempered by a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about revenge or calling Lisa out. It was about creating change. He envisioned a future where businesses like Urban Threads could serve as models of inclusivity and respect, places where everyone felt welcome regardless of their race, background, or appearance. Finally, the day arrived when Sarah's article went live online. Titled, "Thrown Out of His Own Store, A Black Business Owner's Fight for Justice," the piece quickly gained traction. Within hours, it was shared thousands of times on social media, sparking outrage and support from readers across the city and, eventually, the nation. Comments poured in, praising Marcus for his resilience and condemning Lisa's actions. Local news outlets picked up the story, interviewing Marcus and featuring clips from the security footage. Overnight, Urban Threads became more than just a boutique. It became a symbol of resistance against racial profiling. Through it all, Marcus remained grounded. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be pushback, skepticism, and challenges, but he also knew he wasn't alone. The overwhelming response from the community reminded him why he'd started this journey in the first place: to create something meaningful, something that mattered. And now, more than ever, he was determined to see it through. With the evidence gathered, the testimonies collected, and the public squarely on his side, Marcus prepared for the next step: confronting Lisa directly. He didn't want vengeance. He wanted accountability. And as he stood outside the store the following morning, ready to reclaim not just his business but also his principles, Marcus felt a quiet confidence settle over him. This wasn't just about justice for himself. It was about justice for everyone who had ever been judged unfairly, and Marcus Thompson wasn't backing down. The day Marcus decided to confront Lisa was one he had been mentally preparing for since the moment he walked out of his own store. It wasn't just about addressing what had happened to him. It was about setting an example, showing that accountability mattered and proving that Urban Thread stood for something bigger than profits. But as he dressed that morning, choosing a sharp navy blue suit paired with a crisp white shirt, he couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Confidence mingled with apprehension, determination with doubt. This wasn't going to be easy. Marcus arrived at Urban Threads earlier than usual, parking his car a block away so he could gather his thoughts before stepping inside. He carried two things with him: a folder containing all the evidence he'd gathered, employee testimonials, security footage screenshots, and notes from conversations with affected customers, and the unwavering belief that he was doing the right thing. Flanking him were two trusted advisors: Jamal, who had become a close confidant during this ordeal, and Sarah Collins, the journalist whose article had brought national attention to the issue. Their presence wasn't meant to intimidate, it was a statement of solidarity. Marcus wanted Lisa to understand that this wasn't personal, it was about fairness. When they entered the store, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Customers glanced up curiously, sensing the gravity of the situation. Lisa, standing near the register, looked up from her clipboard and froze. Her eyes widened in recognition as she saw Marcus, impeccably dressed and exuding authority. For a split second, she seemed unsure of what to do. Then, regaining her composure, she plastered on a forced smile and approached them. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but wary. Marcus didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Yes, Lisa," he said firmly, his voice steady and commanding. "We need to talk, privately." Without waiting for her response, he gestured toward the stockroom, where they could speak without disturbing customers. Lisa hesitated, glancing nervously at Jamal and Sarah, but ultimately followed him. Once inside, Marcus closed the door behind them, ensuring their conversation would remain uninterrupted. "Lisa," Marcus began, placing the folder on a nearby table. "I'm Marcus Thompson, the owner of Urban Threads. You may recall our interaction the other day." His tone was calm, but there was an edge to it that left no room for misunderstanding. Lisa's face flushed red, and she opened her mouth to respond, but Marcus held up a hand to stop her. "Before you say anything, I want you to listen carefully. What happened wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was part of a larger pattern of behavior, one that I've uncovered through speaking with employees, reviewing security footage, and hearing directly from customers." He opened the folder and slid a series of documents across the table. Each page contained damning evidence: screenshots of Lisa trailing black customers while ignoring others, written accounts from employees detailing her discriminatory remarks, and even transcriptions of audio clips captured by the store's cameras. Lisa stared at the papers, her expression shifting from shock to defensiveness. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, though her voice lacked conviction. "It's not ridiculous," Marcus countered, his voice rising slightly but remaining controlled. "It's real, and it's unacceptable. Do you know what it feels like? To walk into your own store and be treated like you don't belong? To have someone judge you, not based on your actions or your character, but solely on how you look?" He paused, letting his words sink in. "That's exactly what you did, to me. And unfortunately, I'm not the only one who's experienced this kind of treatment under your management." Lisa crossed her arms tightly over her chest, her posture rigid. "I was just doing my job," she insisted, her voice tinged with frustration. "You can't expect me to trust every random person who walks in here claiming to be the owner. There are protocols for a reason." Marcus shook his head slowly, his gaze unwavering. "This isn't about protocols, Lisa. This is about bias, about prejudice. If I were a white man walking in here wearing the same hoodie, would you have reacted the same way? Would you have accused me of loitering or called security?" She didn't answer, but her silence spoke volumes. Jamal stepped forward then, his presence adding weight to the conversation. Lisa, we've all seen how you treat certain customers, he said quietly but firmly. You follow them around, question their intentions, make assumptions about whether they can afford our clothes. That's not okay. It makes people feel unwelcome and it goes against everything this store stands for. Sarah added her perspective next. And let's not forget the impact this has beyond just this store. Retail spaces should be inclusive, environments where everyone feels valued. When incidents like these happen, they reinforce harmful stereotypes and perpetuate systemic racism. You may think you're just doing your job, but your actions have consequences that ripple far beyond these walls. For the first time, Lisa's defensive facade cracked. She looked down at the floor, her shoulders slumping slightly. I didn't mean for it to escalate like this, she mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was protecting the store, keeping things running smoothly. That's the problem, Marcus interjected, his tone softening slightly but still resolute. You confused protecting the store with discriminating against people. Those aren't the same thing. Urban Threads is built on values of inclusivity, creativity, and community. Your behavior doesn't align with those principles. In fact, it undermines them completely. As the confrontation continued, Marcus made it clear that this wasn't about punishment. It was about accountability. He explained that Lisa's resignation would likely be necessary, given the public backlash and loss of trust among employees and customers. However, he also emphasized that her departure alone wouldn't solve the deeper issues at play. This isn't just about you, Lisa, he said. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels respected and valued. That starts with education, training, and a commitment to change. By the end of the meeting, Lisa was visibly shaken. She agreed to step down as interim manager, citing the overwhelming pressure and scrutiny she now faced. While Marcus accepted her decision, he reminded her that true growth came from acknowledging mistakes and working to prevent them in the future. As she packed up her belongings and left the store for the last time, Marcus felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that justice had been served, but sadness that such a confrontation had been necessary in the first place. With Lisa gone, Marcus turned his focus back to the store and its mission. He gathered his team for a heartfelt meeting, thanking them for their courage and honesty throughout the ordeal. Together, they discussed ways to ensure Urban Threads remained a safe, welcoming space for everyone. They brainstormed ideas for diversity training workshops, community outreach programs, and partnerships with local organizations dedicated to combating racial bias. As Marcus locked up the store that evening, he reflected on everything that had transpired. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. He knew there would be challenges and setbacks, but he also knew he wasn't alone. The overwhelming support from the community, the lessons learned, and the resolve to create lasting change fueled his determination. Urban Threads wasn't just a business anymore. It was a movement, a beacon of hope and resilience in a world that often fell short of its promises. And Marcus Thompson was ready to lead the charge. The fallout from Marcus's confrontation with Lisa spread like wildfire, igniting conversations far beyond the walls of Urban Threads. By the time Sarah Collins's article hit the internet, it had already gained traction on social media platforms, with hashtags like Justice for Marcus and an Urban Threads movement trending locally and then nationally. People were outraged, not just by Lisa's actions, but by the systemic issues her behavior represented. For many, Marcus's story was a mirror reflecting their own experiences of being judged, excluded, or mistreated because of their race. Within hours of the article going live, Marcus began receiving messages from strangers across the country. Some shared stories of similar encounters in retail stores, recounting moments when they'd been followed, questioned, or outright dismissed because of how they looked. Others expressed gratitude for Marcus's courage in speaking out, saying his actions gave them hope that change was possible. One message stood out to Marcus. A young black woman wrote about how she'd stopped shopping at certain stores after repeatedly feeling unwelcome, only to rediscover her love for fashion thanks to Urban Threads. Your store makes me feel seen, she wrote. Thank you for standing up for all of us. As the days passed, the attention grew exponentially. Local news stations picked up the story, interviewing Marcus on camera outside Urban Threads. He spoke passionately about the importance of inclusivity in retail spaces and the need for businesses to actively combat racial bias. "This isn't just about one person or one incident," he told reporters. "It's about recognizing the patterns that exist and working together to break them. We can do better, and we must." The public reaction was overwhelming. Customers flocked to Urban Threads in droves, eager to support a business that stood for justice and equality. Sales skyrocketed, and orders poured in online from people who wanted to wear clothes designed by a brand rooted in empowerment. Social media influencers amplified the message, posting photos of themselves wearing Urban Threads outfits alongside captions celebrating resilience and representation. Even celebrities joined the conversation, praising Marcus for using his platform to advocate for meaningful change. But not everyone applauded Marcus's efforts. Predictably, there was backlash too. A small but vocal group accused him of exaggerating the situation or seeking attention. Some commenters argued that Lisa's actions weren't racially motivated, dismissing the evidence as circumstantial. Others claimed Marcus should have handled the matter privately instead of airing it publicly. While these criticisms stung, Marcus refused to let them derail him. He knew that progress often came with resistance, and he remained focused on the bigger picture. One particularly tense moment occurred during a live television interview. The host, trying to appear neutral, asked Marcus if he thought firing Lisa was too harsh a punishment. "After all," the host said, "she might have simply made a mistake." Marcus took a deep breath before responding, choosing his words carefully. "Let's be clear," he said, leaning slightly forward. "This wasn't a single mistake. It was part of a pattern. And patterns don't change unless we address them head-on. Firing Lisa wasn't about punishing her. It was about sending a message that discrimination has no place here. If we want real change, we have to hold people accountable." His response resonated deeply with viewers, earning him even more support. It also sparked important discussions about accountability and the role businesses play in shaping societal norms. Urban Threads became a case study in corporate responsibility, with experts analyzing how Marcus handled the situation and what other companies could learn from it. Business schools invited him to speak at conferences, and local organizations reached out to collaborate on initiatives aimed at promoting diversity and inclusion. Amid the whirlwind of attention, Marcus stayed grounded by focusing on his team and his community. He held regular meetings with his employees, encouraging open dialogue about their experiences and ideas for improving the store's culture. Together, they implemented new policies, such as mandatory diversity training sessions and anonymous feedback systems for customers and staff. Marcus also introduced Community Fridays, where a portion of the day's profits went toward supporting local nonprofits working to combat racial inequality. Perhaps the most impactful step Marcus took was launching a series of workshops called Threads of Change. These free events brought together business owners, employees, and community members to discuss topics like unconscious bias, cultural sensitivity, and creating inclusive environments. Each session included interactive activities, guest speakers, and opportunities for participants to share their own stories. The workshops quickly became popular, drawing attendees from neighboring towns and cities. Through it all, Marcus never lost sight of why he started Urban Threads in the first place. He wanted to create something that celebrated diversity and gave people a sense of belonging. Now more than ever, he saw the power of that mission. Every customer who walked through the door, every positive review, and every heartfelt message reminded him that this fight was worth it, not just for himself, but for everyone who deserved to feel valued and respected. As weeks turned into months, the initial frenzy of media coverage began to die down, but the impact of Marcus's actions lingered. Urban Threads had become more than a boutique. It was a symbol of resilience and a catalyst for change. People didn't just come to shop. They came to connect, to learn, and to stand in solidarity with a movement that represented something greater than any one individual. For Marcus, the journey reinforced a truth he'd always believed: that adversity, when faced with courage and conviction, can lead to transformation. He hadn't set out to make headlines or spark a national conversation, but he embraced the opportunity to use his voice for good. As he stood behind the counter one evening, watching a diverse crowd of customers laugh, browse, and bond over shared experiences, Marcus felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Urban Threads wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. And in its success, he saw the promise of a brighter, more inclusive future. With renewed determination, Marcus turned his attention to the next chapter. There was still so much work to be done, not just within his own store, but across industries and communities. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. Against all odds, he had turned pain into purpose, humiliation into hope, and injustice into inspiration. And that, he realized, was the true measure of success. Months after the incident with Lisa, Marcus Thompson found himself reflecting on how far he'd come, not just as a business owner, but as a person. Urban Threads had transformed from a small boutique into a beacon of hope and resilience, a place where people didn't just shop for clothes but also connected over shared values of inclusivity and justice. The store buzzed with energy every day, filled with customers who felt seen, heard, and valued. But Marcus knew that this wasn't the end of the journey. It was only the beginning. One afternoon, as he sat at his desk reviewing sales reports, Marcus received an email from a local community center inviting him to speak at their annual diversity summit. The subject line read, "Helping others learn from your story." At first, Marcus hesitated. Public speaking still made him nervous, especially when it involved sharing such a personal experience. But then he thought about the countless messages he'd received from strangers thanking him for inspiring them to stand up against injustice. He realized that his story had the power to spark change beyond his own neighborhood, and maybe even beyond his lifetime. The day of the summit arrived, and Marcus stood backstage clutching his notes tightly. His heart raced as he listened to the MC introduce him. Today, we're honored to have Marcus Thompson, a trailblazer in the fight for equity and inclusion in retail spaces. Through his courage and determination, Marcus has shown us what it means to turn adversity into opportunity. As applause erupted, Marcus took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The room was packed. Hundreds of faces turned toward him, eager to hear what he had to say. Marcus began by recounting the events that led to his confrontation with Lisa. He described the humiliation of being thrown out of his own store, the frustration of uncovering patterns of discrimination, and the resolve that drove him to take action. "It would have been easy to let anger consume me," he admitted, pausing to look at the audience. "But I chose a different path, a path rooted in accountability, education, and growth. Because while holding one person responsible is important, true change happens when we address the systems that allow bias to thrive." From there, Marcus shifted his focus to solutions. He talked about the workshops he'd launched, emphasizing the importance of open dialogue and empathy in combating prejudice. "We can't fix what we don't acknowledge," he said. "That's why creating safe spaces for honest conversations is so crucial. It's not about pointing fingers. It's about learning from each other and growing together." He encouraged businesses to implement diversity training programs, hire diverse leadership teams, and actively seek feedback from employees and customers alike. As Marcus spoke, he noticed something remarkable happening in the audience. People weren't just listening, they were nodding, taking notes, and whispering to one another. When he finished his speech, the crowd erupted into applause, many standing to show their appreciation. Dozens of attendees approached him afterward, shaking his hand and expressing gratitude for his insights. One woman, tears streaming down her face, hugged him tightly. "Thank you for giving me the courage to speak up," she whispered. In that moment, Marcus felt a profound sense of purpose, a reminder that his story wasn't just his own anymore. It belonged to everyone who needed it. Back at Urban Threads, Marcus continued expanding his efforts to create systemic change. Inspired by the success of the Threads of Change workshops, he partnered with local schools to teach students about cultural sensitivity and the importance of representation. He also collaborated with other Black-owned businesses to form a coalition aimed at amplifying marginalized voices and promoting economic empowerment within their communities. Together, they organized pop-up markets, networking events, and mentorship programs designed to uplift aspiring entrepreneurs. But perhaps the most meaningful initiative Marcus launched was the Urban Threads Scholarship Fund. Recognizing the barriers many young people of color faced in pursuing careers in fashion and design, he established a scholarship program to provide financial support and mentorship opportunities. Recipients weren't just awarded money. They were invited to intern at Urban Threads, gaining hands-on experience in everything from marketing to product development. For Marcus, it was a way to pay forward the opportunities he'd fought so hard to create for himself. As the months passed, Marcus noticed subtle yet significant shifts in the world around him. Retailers across the country started adopting policies modeled after those implemented at Urban Threads. Conversations about racial bias in customer service became more common, sparking debates and driving progress. Even some of Marcus's critics softened their stance, acknowledging the positive impact his advocacy had made. While he knew there was still much work to be done, these small victories gave him hope. On a quiet Sunday evening, Marcus locked up the store and walked outside, gazing at the bustling street lined with shops and cafes. Families strolled by, children laughed, and music drifted from nearby speakers. Everything seemed alive, vibrant, and full of possibility. For a moment, Marcus allowed himself to soak it all in: the sounds, the sights, the feeling of accomplishment. Then he glanced back at Urban Threads, its windows glowing warmly under the setting sun. This place had been his dream, his sanctuary, and now, his platform for change. Inside his car, Marcus pulled out his phone and opened a note app. He typed a single sentence: "Pain can either break you or build you stronger. Choose wisely." It was a lesson he'd learned firsthand, one he hoped to pass on to others facing their own struggles. As he drove home, he thought about the future, not just for Urban Threads, but for the movement it had inspired. He envisioned a world where no one had to prove their worth based on appearance, where every space was inclusive and welcoming, and where stories like his became relics of the past. When Marcus finally arrived home, he poured himself a cup of tea and settled into his favorite chair. On the table beside him lay sketches for new designs, bold, colorful pieces that told stories of resilience, unity, and hope. Picking up his pencil, he began sketching again, letting his creativity flow freely. Each stroke reminded him of why he started this journey in the first place: to create something beautiful, something meaningful, something that could inspire others to believe in themselves and their ability to make a difference. And so, as the night grew darker and the city lights twinkled outside his window, Marcus Thompson smiled. He had taken pain and turned it into purpose, using his voice and his vision to challenge injustice and champion equality. Urban Threads was no longer just a store, it was a legacy. And Marcus knew that as long as he kept fighting for what was right, that legacy would continue to grow, touching lives and transforming communities for generations to come.